Aloha mai kākou, o Kavika Riley ko uinoa. Ku'u one hanau, ma moku o Keawe. Kohala a me kona. Noho au ma kaimuki. Velina mai, welcome to this conversation that we'll be having for the next hour. For those of you joining us here at the United Nations in person, as well as those of you who are joining us from places that are your home or places in between. We look forward to the dialogue. My name is Kavika Riley. He Hawaii au, I am Native Hawaiian. The sands of my birth are on the island of Hawaii. I was born and raised in Kohala and Kona, and I live now with my family in Kaimuki on the island of Oahu. I am the Chief Communications Officer at Niatero. For those of you who are just hearing about us for the first time, Niatero is an international nonprofit whose sole purpose is to support Indigenous people's guardianship of our homelands and waters. I want to thank Cultural Survival for the opportunity to have this discussion here today, and thank, in addition, for what they've made possible here in person. I want to thank Poanka Fund, Niatero, Wayfinder Circle, Council of Elders, for making it possible for us to have this discussion live streamed in various ways. Now, the title for this event, if I remember it now as I'm talking to you all and feeling nervous here on this stage, you might know that it's In Conversation, Indigenous Women on Health, Healing, and Conflict. For those of you who are paying attention, you probably also noticed that there's something that I do not have in common with the rest of my esteemed panel. Unlike those that you will be hearing from for the rest of the hour, I am not an Indigenous woman, I am a man. And so the question may be asked, what am I doing on this stage? My answer is because the powerful, courageous, and brilliant Indigenous women who developed this concept and made it possible for us to have this conversation today asked me to do this. And I've learned as a son, certainly as a husband, and as a father of powerful women, that when you're asked to help, there is one appropriate answer, yes. And there is one appropriate question, how? So the how is I'll be serving as the moderator for our conversation. And in this respect, I think maybe I can play an appropriate role. When it comes to this conversation, like a moderator, I have questions. Like a moderator, I want to learn and listen and be part of the discussion. And a moderator does not have the answers, which I don't either. Those of us that are on stage with me, you have the answers. And I look forward to learning from all of you. So with that introduction, I wanted to start by asking each of you if you could please introduce yourself, the community that you identify with, and then if you could talk just for a moment, because all of us are here physically at the United Nations, and so something, a responsibility, an issue, an opportunity brings you to this place in addition to bringing you to this stage. So if you could please share a little bit about that too. Your name, your community, and why are you here at the UN today?
Good afternoon. My name is Maria Martin. I am a member of the Helsik Nation, a small remote community in Bella Bella, British Columbia, Canada. I am here today as an elected leader for my nation. And when I was proposed the opportunity to participate, I accepted, not knowing really fully what to expect. And at day 4, I've come to realize that On a global scale, much of our issues are the same. We have the same passion to improve all aspects of livelihood for Indigenous people on a global scale. And I take a lot of learning, and I'm going to turn all the conversations, all the dialogue, all the interventions I've witnessed into a further passion moving forward in unity for Indigenous people's issues. Kaya sika.
Puuras, mun ammala Ellen Sayets, kantas saamol sulomika Ellen. Hello, good afternoon to everyone. My name is Ellen Sayets, and I come from Sami in Finland, and I represent the Youth Council of the Sami Parliament in Finland. I came here because it is our yearly program to come here, so we have the opportunity to attend these events, and I also had an intervention last night or evening about the Sami Parliament Act that just went through. And I also want to thank you for inviting me here. It is a special opportunity for me to be on this stage and have the opportunity to speak my mind. So I thank you for that. And I'm also taking this as a learning opportunity, a really big one. It has been a lot of new experiences for me, a lot of new big stages to be in. So yeah, I'm just trying to learn here and try to represent the youth from Finland and from Sápmi overall. Thank you.
Okay, Nitsaguax. Anakok Ikinokomi. My name is Gentle Rolling Thunder. I always get nervous when I have to introduce myself. And the reason for that is that I don't have my language, and I'm really angry about that because that was my birthright to have. And now when I introduce myself in my language, I have to feel the trauma of not having that language, but I'm still trying. And how I introduce myself has a lot of meaning that I'll talk about in a little bit. But my name is Lana Running Wolf. I'm a co-founder of Black Vidiko Knowledge along with my husband, Tyson Running Wolf. And we come here as part of the Wayfinder Circle organization. And what we do, why we come here, and what we bring to the week-long event is what we're learning from our culture, and then it's beautiful to learn from all the other cultures and learn the similarities of the issues that we face, but also to see the resilience and the beautiful cultures that all Indigenous people have. And so it's really exciting to be able to witness the cultures unfold in the way that we wear, we dress, the way that we speak about our cultures, or the way we use our languages. And so that's what brings me here. And plus, like we all said, learning is at the core of who I am.
Thank you. And thank you all for being here. Maria, perhaps if we could start with you. I've heard you speak passionately and with great depth of knowledge about the restorative justice systems and practices in your own community. I'm wondering if you could share about that with all of us, and if you could talk not only about these systems and practices in general, but also about the role that women play in ensuring that these practices are effective, that they thrive, and that they are perpetuated across the generations.
Yes, I will speak first to the role of women in our community. We have been reestablishing our roles after being stripped of much of who we are through the colonial systems, and one of the greatest accomplishments that women have come to in my community is they're called the Minuyaks Council, or Wheelmucks. And to translate that, it is Sisters of a Sister. And it's a group of, the composition is a group of women who represent a tribal leader known as a hereditary chief in our community. They oversee a lot of the more challenging aspects of how we live day to day. And one of them is supporting justice advisory through our restorative justice practices. And when there are hardships and challenges that an individual faces, they align themselves to look at the root causes and how to address in ways that there's going to be not only consequences but learning from mistakes made. And also the more harder matters, there's a process where there's partnerships and collaboration with the legal system. And they go back and forth to deliberate on any punishment, so to speak, if there are extreme situations or criminal situations. There is also a process where there's a reintegration. There's also a process of isolation. And these are for the more extreme situations where if legally a person has been shipped off to jail or incarcerated, and the group of women support through an ongoing reintegration plan. Or in another, I spoke about isolation, and it's where there is a collective and supportive decision that rather than incarceration, a person will go out to isolation. And it is in a location in a remote community where there again is a safety plan that is put in place before any of the enforcement of isolation or reintegration occurs.
Thank you so much for that. Our discussion just got a little bit larger. We have one more panelist joining us. I'm wondering if we could pass the mic down. We wanted to give you the opportunity to introduce yourself, both to the community in the room and those who are joining us from various live stream. If you could share your name, the community that you are from, and then what brings you to the United Nations? Why do you choose to be here when you could be in a variety of places?
Great questions. Thank you so much. Niawi scanat gagwego, wasantat nit gaso and guatemweka, anundawat gai bueno. My name is Kaylina Bray. I'm from the Seneca Nation, part of the Cattaraugus territory, and my name in Seneca is Wasentat, which I said in my greeting, which is the sound and the rhythm that takes place when you shake a rattle. And I currently live not too far from New York City, about 45 minutes away. And I'm here today for various reasons. I think it's an important space to connect with people. I really see it as a connecting space, but also we need presence and these important decision-making frameworks and policies. And so to be able to support that in any way that I can, I come here as I work at a philanthropic organization called Tamalpais Trust, and we are an Indigenous-led organization that supports and also Indigenous-led work taking place globally. And so part of my reason for being here is also to understand what is happening, some of the challenges and the context and situations that my relatives, I feel, are in. I've been in this space in various capacities, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy. My dad has been a big part of bringing delegations here, so I also feel a bit of a part of me tries to carry that on as well. So it's quite an honor to be here. My apologies for being late. I'm so excited to be part of this incredible panel, and thank you, Nyawe.
We're excited to have you. Thank you for that introduction. Ellen, if we could go to you next. Can you talk with us about the connection between the health of land and the health of people? In other words, when land is harmed, how does that impact the health, the healing, and the conflict resolution of the people that belong to it?
Yes, thank you. Well, first of all, what happens to our lands happens to us. So what the land is being put through happens also to our bodies, also to our minds. Especially our mental health is being at risk when our land is being harmed. And of course, when we have to protest against our lands being harmed, we have to be away from our daily jobs, our relatives, our families, and it's time away from the people that we love. And for example, where I'm from, there's a river called Teatno River, and we have had the right to fish there for as long as we can remember, and we have caught the fish there to support our families. But now, about 5 years ago, it has become illegal for us to fish there, which has been a dramatic change for our community and the way we live and the way we know about doing things. So basically, the fishers who have been raised by the river have now been dragged away from the river. And for some people, it is a very hard subject to even talk about. Some people cannot even look at the river anymore because it's so important to us. So that's one of the ways that it's harming our mental health, for sure. There has not been that much research on mental health issues regarding this thing, but I really hope that we could get more research, because it is important that we have that acknowledgement and that we can get the help that we need for that. And other thing is the reindeer herding community, because I come from a reindeer herding family myself. So usually the reindeer herders, when they greet each other, they don't ask, how are you doing? They ask, how are the reindeer? So when the reindeer are in a good spot and when the land is good, the reindeer is good, and that means that the people are also doing fine. So that's the connection that we have to the lands we are on. And if lands are being harmed, for example, by windmills or mining, that means that we have to move our herds to other places, which means more work for the reindeer herders. And of course then that means a bigger role for the women. It's a more male-centered area, the reindeer herding. So when the reindeer herders have to be more away from the families, that means also more responsibility and more being at home, for example, with the kids, for the women. So that brings a new pressure on women. And it's not really talked about how much women put into that. And yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Anna, we were talking earlier about, a few things, right? And one of them was the challenge when we have these sort of like tightly timed opportunities, interventions, sometimes they're being called here, to discuss very important things and try to get to the deep level. And in 180 seconds, a 3-minute intervention or an 8-minute intervention, often we end up just scratching the surface and touching those surface level issues. I wanted to invite all of us to have this conversation be an intervention into that. And what I mean is I wanted to invite you to talk about some of those deeper issues that connect the surface level matters that we're discussing, right? So the energy and the connective tissue behind some of the problems, challenges, and opportunities that we were talking about before this panel.
Thanks. I forgot that that was what I wanted to talk about. And then now I'm like, what was I going to say? But no, I love the interventions. Everything, like we talked about, the interventions and the discussions that are had here in these spaces are always so, it makes you realize that you're just one little small blip in the global scale of everything that's happening in our communities. And but what I don't hear people talking about that needs to be talked about in these spaces is the deep level of our ontologies. If we want health, if we want change, if we want safety, if we want security, all of the things that we're fighting for, we have to go back to the deep level roots of our paradigms. And a lot of our own people don't understand what those are, because they're not easy to talk about, because when you talk about energy or spirituality, you're like, oh, people shut down on you and they don't want to go to that level. But so just to give an example, when I introduced myself in my language, Oki Nitsukwax. Nitsukwax is my relatives. And in my culture, I think I forgot to say we're Nitsitapi from the Blackfoot Confederacy, but our name is Nitsitapi, which means real people. We're the real people of the place that we come from, and we come from the place of the Ini, which is the bison, or we call them buffalo, or Ini is our word. We're connected to that place. We're connected to that animal. Our language, everything is the universe, the stars, our stories, our songs. Our ontology is connected to the place, and it's connected to us. So, excuse me. So I think that's what people, need to understand is at the level of our culture, Nitsugwaks, everybody is related. We're all related. In my culture, Itapadapiop is the energy force, the ultimate energy force. It's not the sun or the moon. It's the energy, the energy force that all of those things in all of us come from. So every cell in our body, every molecule in our body is made up of Itzapatipiope. And those chairs have Itzapatipiope. The energy that we come from collectively, all of you have Itzapatipiope. So we're related because of that. And the other part of our culture is the understanding of that. Our whole journey we're doing in life is about balance, finding balance. And when what we're dealing with here at the forum is out of a series of issues that are telling us they're indicators of that we're out of balance. The whole world is out of balance. And it's because we're not going back to those roots of Itzapatipiope in our energy force, in how we use our energy and how we balance our energy, and how we balance our relationships with the land, how we balance our relationships with each other through the genders. Because one of the really important things in our culture is Gipitaki, which is the moon, the old lady, and Napinatusi, which is the sun, the old man. They both have roles that they do. Not one, we can't live without one or the other. We can't sustain life without the sun or the moon. They carry the most Itzapatipiope. And so we follow those roles that the moon and the sun carry, which means we're not paternalistic or we're not maternalistic, because we each have our roles that we carry, and those roles are important. So all the way down to like everything, understanding how our balance is with the earth and with everything with Itzapatipiope. That's what our culture is based on. So all of our ceremonies, our ceremonial practices, our language, our values, everything is to help us learn how to create that balance, which is it's not a constant state you can ever reach. It's every day trying to stay in that balance, and you use the tools such as your ceremonies and your language to try to stay in balance. And so I think that's at that level, and I know it's there because I've heard some of the cultures here allude to their that deep level paradigm. I think it needs to be more present in these kind of spaces where we're talking about digging to those roots, and then when we get to the ontology of who we are and where we come from, and we all start sharing that openly with the world, and not protecting it so much that we're protecting our own cultures to death, and we're sharing it with the world, then we might help the world find balance. So that's what I feel is really needed in these spaces.
I think that's wonderful, and I'm smiling because I think you have a common sister to your left. Right? When we were chatting and emailing about this earlier, we had mentioned the importance of language and ceremony and culture. And I wanted to invite you to expand on that and share a little bit about your perspective on the importance of these things to these bigger issues of health and wellness and conflict resolution.
Thank you for setting me up so no, I have also been reflecting quite a bit on some of what you've actually been talking about, and really coming back to some of our important ways of understanding and connecting to place. And for us, for Seneca, for Haudenosaunee, we connect through food and through planting. And my dad grows white corn, and so I grew up eating our specific type of Seneca white corn. But we have an important way of talking about the corn, and I think it goes to what you were saying about that relationship. It's not that we're talking about a specific element, but we think about it as our ancestor, our relation, and when we have the corn, we have our beans and our squash. And so there's a word for that we say called joheko. And it's English is such a tough language to really convey the relationality of things. But one way to think about it is that it's our life-giving force. It gives us life. And that itself doesn't even do it justice because this ties so deeply to our creation story. But the idea is that you have corn, beans, and squash, and they exist together in a relationship because the beans give the nitrogen to the soil, and then the corn can grow, and then the squash, gives some shade so that the beans can grow, and they all are together. And we understand this as almost, it's part of our life way that is tied to ceremony. So it almost dictates how we're in relationship to the rest of our place. And we have ceremony around when we plant corn, and then way back when, our women were the ones who were really caretaking our food systems. And that shifted over time, but it was an important role, and it still is an important role. I think today women are the main ones who take care of our food. And I think, we have also a system that there was, when you have a way of understanding and taking care of the food system, you understand that you can dictate how certain decisions are made. And so women also were a big part of determining whether or not we go to war, because if you don't have food, you can't go to war. Women also were able to, let the chiefs know that they weren't doing their jobs well. So there's a big role for women. I'm just wanted to bring it back to the role of women as well. And we also have that important balance. We need strong men also to have strong women. And we've always known that. And I think we're in a particularly precarious time with climate change, with our mental health, with our relationship to land. And I think it goes back to bringing us into a type of balance. And I really resonated with what you said because it speaks to a lot of the ways that we see and think about that type of coming into balance as an everyday practice of giving thanks, and ceremonies being a big part of doing that. And so that is why they are so essential for our life as we know it, quite frankly. So I'll end there.
That's a great place to end. I think so. So next, I'm also thinking about so we've been emailing over the course of the last week and communicating by other means, and we talked about what we'd like to discuss and what some of the really important areas to probe and intervene on might be. And I think the most important one or the most popular one that we haven't talked about yet is the role of mothers and grandmothers in our cultures, in our communities. And one thing that every single person alive and every single person who has been alive has in common is they exist thanks to a mother. I exist thanks to my mother's incredible power to bring me to life, and her willingness and eagerness to give birth to me. And the same thing is true in different ways for all of us. So as we, going into that, I was wondering if we could maybe just go down the line and answer that question that many of you really highlighted as something that you wanted to discuss, the importance of mothers and grandmothers in the health and well-being of your communities or the broader human community.
Yeah, thank you. Our grandmothers, our mothers, our aunties play a very integral part in the livelihood of our children, our nieces, our nephews. And in my community, I'll speak for my generation specifically, that a lot of us were raised by our grandmothers, and one of the things that was very empowering was that our grandmothers kept us safe. They kept us from being taken out of our community. And this continues today as we fight systems of child welfare. We have a strong group of female leadership that's comprised of our grandmothers, of our aunties, and they oversee the holistic well-being of children in our community, and they ensure that those family ties and connections remain. And in doing that and saying that, it takes a lot of work, and it means connecting to, further to our culture, to our traditions, and really enacting and bringing out generational knowledge, carrying out traditions, carrying out other forms of love and care for children, really ensuring that every aspect of one's well-being is taken care of. And in our families, we have those strong matriarchs who step up without question to love and care for our children, and making sure that they're rooted to our land and to our water. We're ocean people, and those connections bring a lot of strength to our children. And we have children who practice our culture and our ceremonies in a big house, and they go away from our community, and they live off the land and are out on the waters every day. And it's proven to be very successful, because those who participate in those opportunities are the most strong and respectful little beings in our community. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. It's really hard to continue after everything that you said. Thank you for that. I think that the Sami grandmothers are really special, and of course I'm really thankful for my own grandmothers who gave me the courage to come here today. I have a story about what happened not too many days ago in my town, or near my town. There were some men doing their work, reindeer herding. They had some spring work to do. They were driving around whole night trying to just work, and they hadn't eaten for the whole day. And one grandmother, one ahku, as we say in Sami language, or Northern Sami language, heard that they hadn't eaten anything for the whole day. And so she made a whole bowl full of food for at least 20-30 people to feed. And she forced everyone to eat, because she wouldn't let them be in hunger. And so she stayed on and watched until the end, that the bowl was empty and everyone had eaten. So I think that really shows how much they care for us, and how much they have always cared for us. Of course, Sami women have, our grandmothers, our mothers have a special like a special bond between us, and they also have an important role for clothing us, because the kakti, the regalia that we wear, they are often made by our mothers or our grandmothers. So we have to be thankful that they do all the work for us. And the handicrafts in general are of course very special to us, but it's also a bonding between the generations, because the younger generation gets to learn from the older generation, and not only doing the actual handicrafts, but also there is so much more happening doing the handicrafts. There is being information passed on to the younger generation in between the lines. It's not said directly, but it's taught in between the lines. So it has been very special for me to do that. I have learned myself to do that for the past year. So it's been very special for me, and that's why I wanted to say that. Thank you.
I think that grandmother that you were talking about would fit in very well in Hawaii.
I think I'll just tell a story because I like the in between the lines teaching. Not that I'm an elder, but I'll tell the story or talk about my mother. And somebody told me yesterday, gave me a compliment on my dresses that I wear, that I've wore this week. And I said my mom makes all of my dresses and skirts, and my sisters and our whole family. And, you know, she's watching right now, so I know she's really happy to hear me say that I got compliments. But anyway, there's so much of our culture that we're having to revitalize through the history of colonization and what happened to our community, which I don't even think a lot of our own people know exactly what happened and why they may not have their language or their culture. But we have a lot of elders that are teaching us and helping us revitalize. So we do a project with justice, like what you said earlier. Restorative justice, yeah. We have a project with restorative justice where we bring in participants that could either take the incarceration, or they could come into our alternative court where they have to learn from elders. And so one of the elders at one of the modules that we do was teaching about grandmothers and what they do and the roles that they play and what they used to play before colonization, before contact. And they told a story of our of the matriarchs in our culture, societies that used to exist for when the mothers were pregnant, and the grandmothers would come together and they would teach the mothers, as while the babies were in utero, they would teach them how to care for their bodies and teach them the things that they could eat and couldn't eat. And they would teach them all about energy and the things that you say and how you use your language and the energy you're putting, that's all being imprinted right from utero. They were teaching about the process of birth and all the things that we would help our young women when they were preparing for this new life that they were going to be bringing into the world. And they described this ceremony that we used to have that they saw when they were younger, but we don't have them anymore. And matter of fact, I had never heard of this ceremony where when we're getting close to the baby being born, they would, the grandmothers and the ceremonial people that had the sacred rites would paint the mother's belly, and right before she was going to have, or like a week or so before she was going to have her baby. And so my mom was just really blown away by that, and she's passionate about trying to help revitalize so many things in our culture that And so she went, after this module, she went to that elder and she started asking questions about this specific ceremony. And my daughter was pregnant at the time. So she was like, I'm going to start this back, at least just in my family, if that's all I can do right now. So we were at our summer solstice, our Akugatsis, which is our big circle camp. And my daughter was very, very near her time to have the baby. And so we went into the lodge and she reconstructed this ceremony the same way that she was taught by this elder. And it was so beautiful. My daughter, without going into full detail, my daughter, the mothers paint and grandmothers painted her belly with our sacred paint, and prayed for the birth and for the life of this child, and the imprinting of this child to be solid in our culture. And then when we got done, the older granddaughter, who was 2 at the time, when my daughter got done getting painted, she stood up, and then my 2-year-old granddaughter went over and laid down and lifted her shirt up, and it was her time to get painted, and so we painted her too. But right then, I was like, this is what our culture is. This is what we're missing, is having these opportunities. Not only was the baby in utero being imprinted, but my 2-year-old granddaughter was being imprinted in our way of life, and knowing that she's part of something and she belongs to something, whether she's looks the part or is enrolled or not. She's part of this culture, and my 2 grandbabies are now, their sense of belonging is going to be solidly intact because of my mother and her willingness to bring back a ceremony that has been gone for a long time, or that not a lot of people know about.
Yeah, for that story. That was really powerful. I just had a son. He's now 15 months, but it feels like I just had him in a way, although time passes much differently with a baby. And I was reflecting on the role of my mother and grandmother throughout that entire time that I was pregnant, and then when I had my son, just how important the role of caretaking of a person who understands you so deeply that it kind of, a lot of things go unspoken. And I think it would have been a much different experience if I didn't have my mom there specifically, but I was away from our community when I gave birth. So I really reflect a lot on how much I miss having my other relatives in my life to help take care of my son, because it feels much lonelier in a way. I mean, I'm still surrounded by other people, but it's not the same as going to any picnic or gathering or something where he can just go run around, and I know that there's going to be so many eyes on him, like his aunties and everyone's going to hold him, and it's just different. So I in absence of that, I think I really deeply feel how important that is. So there's that important reflection, and I think the other thing is that, we're a matrilineal and matriarchal people. So I'm Turtle Clan, my mom is Turtle Clan, and so I'm a grandmother and then my son, and so now there's just a deep connection with the Turtle Clan, and I'd say, because it's matrilineal, all of our gatherings are organized by the aunties and grandmas. All of the things happening are just so much centered on the organizing role of women. And we call our grandmother Uxode, and it's Grandmother Moon also. And so now that I see Uxode with my grandson, I'm just connecting back to how, you know, how important the role of grandmother, grandchild is, because I also had that, and the caretaking, and like, it's kind of hard to explain when to non-mothers. So I'm just glad that I'm in company and can talk a little bit about that. And then last thing to say is that, you know, we have our clan mothers whose role is really to take, to organize everything that takes place in the longhouse and our ceremonies. So without that, you know, it would be a lot of our important pieces of those ceremonies wouldn't fall into place. I mean, there's protocols and responsibilities, and those are the ones that women have, and men have theirs too. So you know, that's part of the role of women. And then more broadly, I think there's a big role for aunties here too. And I feel that in my everyday life, whether, you know, aunties is an expansive term. I consider a lot of different people aunties, and have taught me just as much as my mother has. And I feel like there's a way to relate to aunties that maybe sometimes it's different, and can be a different relationship, more open than with, you know, with your mom, who's your mom. So those are a few reflections around that. Thank you.
Thank you for those reflections. So believe it or not, we're at our last question, final question for our time together. I wanted to ask you to talk about what gives you conviction. To me, right, there's hope is important, and hope can be a source of energy in a lot of different ways. But when I think of conviction, conviction is a powerful force that can inspire us to get up, to be on stage, to come to the United Nations, and to do hard, important things, even perhaps at times when we don't have hope. The conviction can get us there. So I'd like to ask if you could please, each of you, share what gives you conviction. I know you have it because you wouldn't be here otherwise. What could you share with all of us about your conviction?
When I think about what brings me conviction, I think about the personal work and the personal journey that I've been on, and being a mother, and my children losing their father, and really showing up. I'm a mother of 3, and 3 very, very different processes in their grief. All still broken-hearted, and really looking at how I can support them, and, you know, move in ways that are meaningful. And it brought me to being involved with people who don't necessarily have a voice, and who have needs that wouldn't otherwise be met if someone didn't speak and advocate on their behalf. This work and advocacy brings me conviction, and it brings me to many different social areas, but also it also brings services and needs being met for people who otherwise wouldn't be heard if it weren't for advocacy. Thank you.
I have to make sure, because English is not my first language, what is conviction, so that I can answer this properly.
What gives you the energy or the power to persevere during difficult times? In times when perhaps you don't have hope, but you still have that ability to move forward. What gives you that energy?
Maybe someone else would like to. I have to think about it for
We
a
can come back
second.
to you.
I like the way you worded that question, because people don't really like to. It's hard to say, like, the trauma that you've been through, but then that you may not have hope, but you can still have hope in trauma and be resilient, and that kind of formulates your conviction. But Maria and I actually were talking yesterday, and we found in common that our children's father passed away. Going through that was, I can say exactly that time. I had gone through my life oblivious to what our people had gone through in the colonization and the history of our people. And I had gone through life just not even, or having blinders to the social ills and the different traumas that was all throughout our community. And when he passed away of alcoholism, he was 40 years old, young, and a good person. And we had to go through that grief, and I had to make sense of it. And for not only for the sake of myself, but for the sake of my children, I had to make sense of why somebody at that age. And then my blinders were taken off at that point, where I started to see it was something in our whole community. And, that was quite a few years ago. And now what I'm seeing is younger people in our community dying of alcoholism or drug addiction. I became a teacher because I felt like that was the avenue that I could make a difference, which I was. But when I was in the classroom, there was, at least a quarter of my students being raised by their grandparents and losing parents to addiction, and experiencing the same thing that my children experienced. And so I could help them, but I felt like I needed to do more. I needed another avenue because my conviction was so strong that I had to make sense of the trauma that we had gone through in my family and our community. And but today, even though I'm not a teacher, I have a lot of friends that are teachers, and the classrooms are at least more than 70% of the children that are being raised by grandparents. So that's the conviction in my community, knowing that we're losing right now the battle of identity and belonging, and so it drives me. But I see a lot of hope today, because we have a lot of people in our community that are starting to recognize, like I did, that my culture was the way to help me through the things that I had been through. And then my husband, Tyson, he's experienced trauma too, and together our conviction together is that our culture is the thing that's going to help, and it's going to save our community, and it's the most important thing in our lives, to the point that sometimes I think my children don't quite understand because we're so busy, but I think they do. They're slowly starting to see that they themselves also have to tap back into their sense of belonging. And this can help them through the grief and trauma that they have been through. And I'm really proud of my children because they're slowly starting to find their own conviction, and each one of them are starting to find their place on advocacy and how they're going to make a difference in our community. So that's the conviction I feel, is just the culture and the language is so important, because those are the tools that will help us through anything.
Thank you, and thank you for sharing that. Since you talked about alcoholism, I really want to lift that up because it's clearly not talked about enough. What gives me the motivation to go further and do these things is my mother, but not in a good way. She was also, or is, an alcoholic, and I have no connection with her, but that drives me to go towards what I want in life and to be a better person for the next generations. So I really want to push myself and try to be the best version of myself so that the generations after me don't have the same bad experiences that I have. And I also find my mother tongue, the Northern Sami, to be a motivation for me to keep going, because it's such an important thing for me, and I really hope that the Sami language continues, that I get to, of course, speak it to my my kids someday, and my grandchildren, and because it's such a rich language. It has hundreds of ways to explain snow or the reindeer, what their colors look like, or how their horns, what they look like, and or antlers. So I would say that the person who keeps me going is my mother.
Thank you.
No, thank you all for sharing. I was asked a question once that I kind of refer to a lot, which is, what kind of ancestor do you want to be? And I think when I think back to everything that our ancestors went through to pass on our knowledge in the face of so much destruction and attempts to erase our way of life, that it almost feels like a responsibility to keep carrying that on. I mean, not just the responsibility, but the drive to do that, is that we need this. We need this for our people, for our health, and we need it for our lands, for the water. And our Oren Lyons, one of our great faith keepers, he's been at the UN quite a lot, and one of his speeches that really sticks with me is, he's like, if we don't speak for the animals, who will? If we don't speak for our waters, who will? And if we don't speak for our plants, who will? And I don't know. Like, it feels like Indigenous knowledge, our knowledge, is what really thinks about these important other ancestors and our relatives. And so part of that drives, that is a main driver. And I think it is a really challenging time, because we've been so divorced from our landscapes and our ties to the earth, that it has created a lot of these disconnects, and I think we're seeing a lot of the impacts of it through alcohol and through drug use. And so the further we are disconnected from our way of life and from our lands, and like getting into the soil or fishing or just connecting to our culture, I just really think there's an important link, and we're seeing it. So those are also, you know, other drivers that we're all surrounded by. It feels like this is a common tie. So it's a beautiful question, and there are many drivers, and it's ongoing, I think.
Thank you all for your brave honesty, for your time, and for your conviction. That wraps up the time that we have here in conversation. Once again, we want to thank Cultural Survival for making this conversation possible. We also want to thank Poanka Fund, Wayfinder Circle, the Elders Council, and Niatero for making it possible for this conversation to exist, not just within this room, but in the spaces where those of you who are watching us are watching us. Thank you very much. Have a great day. Aloha.